At this year's Chagrin Documentary Film Festival, we have a very important film to share with our audiences called The Conservation Game, directed by Mike Weber. This documentary explores the underbelly of the exotic animal trade and the surprising connection that these underground markets have to celebrity conservationists, most notably Columbus Zoo's Jack Hanna. With much of the investigation taking place right here in Ohio, we are eager to get the word out about this groundbreaking film. Here to tell us a little bit more about her experience with this documentary is one of the subjects of The Conservation Game, Carole Baskin. You may recognize her from Tiger King, Dancing with the Stars, and as the face of Big Cat Rescue. Thank you so much for joining us, Carole. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. You know, I gotta say, you guys are really my kind of cats because you are taking on a situation that is in some circles not going to make you very popular, because there are so many people who found these faux conservationists to be so beloved, and they just can't stand it when their minds are blown and their worlds are blown apart by the things that you are showing. And there's been a number of film festivals that refused to show it because they didn't want the heat. And you guys are really, you're taking the bull by the horns. So thank you.
Thank you. As soon as we saw this film, we knew we had to share it. So we're really excited to highlight it. We're screening it twice in person, and it's going to be on our online platform, so people can watch it in a lot of different ways. I just wanted to start by asking how you got started with working with big cats. Is this something you always knew you wanted to do?
I knew from the time that I was about 8 years old that I wanted to help save domestic cats and kittens from being killed in shelters due to overpopulation. And so that was where I thought I was going to spend my leisure years, was doing that. But as a whole chain of events happened, what ended up happening by the time I was 17 is I was doing bobcat rehab and release. And so that led me to an auction where we purchased our first bobcat, who was being sold to a taxidermist who was going to club her in the head and turn her into a den decoration. And then that led us to trying to find somebody for her to play with, because she was wretched, as you might imagine, as a pet. And so that led us to a fur farm where we discovered 56 bobcats and lynx were going to be killed for their fur. And so we came home with all 56. We bought out the rest of those cats the following year, 28 more cats, all of the adults. And then the following year, we bought out another fur farm with the agreement that they never kill cats again for their fur. And then people started calling and saying, hey, would you take my lion? Would you take my tiger? And at each one of those junctures, I thought I could fix that. And I was really naive because it's taken a lot longer to do that. But I think we're closing in on ending the abuse of these big cats in cages now.
That's amazing. And that's what this film is all about. How did you get started with the director, Mike Weber? And when did you first hear about The Conservation Game, the film?
It was probably about 10 years ago at our annual fur ball. It was our big gala where we had given the Guardian Angel Award to the star of The Conservation Game film, Tim Harrison. He was a firefighter, paramedic, police officer, and was working in Dayton, Ohio when a pet cougar escaped. And usually in those situations, they just kill the cats because nobody is trained to handle that. And he ran right into the face of danger and grabbed that cat with a snare pole and got it by the tail and carried it off of the scene. And so when I saw that come out in the newspapers, this had happened in Dayton, Ohio, I said, I got to find this guy and give him our Guardian Angel Award. So he came and he brought Mike Weber with him. And that was when we first met him. And then probably about 5 years ago, maybe 6 now, is when they first came to us and pitched the idea of doing this film.
I've heard this film referred to as the Blackfish for big cats. Is that the way you see it?
Yes, there's been a number of different filmmakers who have come to us over the years saying they wanted to make the Blackfish for big cats. And for people who don't know what Blackfish is, it was a film that showed what happens at these seaquariums for orcas and dolphins. And once people saw the abuse, they wouldn't support it anymore. And SeaWorld and other places had to change their model and stop exploiting these animals the way they had been. And so we wanted to do that for big cats. And as you know, a number of different people had approached this subject, none of them really hit quite on the mark as the Conservation Game film did for being that Blackfish equivalent.
I mean, it's really amazing all the revelations that occur during the film. Did any of it surprise you? Did you have an idea of kind of the underworld and all these connections to celebrity conservationists, or were you just as surprised as the rest of us?
Since 1992, I have known about all of these animal abusers and how they get their animals. I've known about how these people go on the late night shows and take these babies. And I knew that they were lying to the public, and I knew that they were dealing with backyard breeders. And I believed, I couldn't prove it, but I believed that once they were using those animals, that they were probably ending up in horrible situations. What really surprised me about the conservation game film was that they were able to find any of these animals. There's a very noteworthy scene in the conservation game where Cy, who is helping them locate some of these animals, said, "I wouldn't bet you a nickel that we could find even one of these." And I would have agreed with Cy. There was no way they were going to find any of these animals because they just disappear into a black hole. And the fact that they found any of them, I thought, was astounding.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I have to ask, have you ever met Jack Hanna or any of these other celebrity conservationists?
I met Jack Hanna back in 1998, I think. He came out to, back then, our facility was called Wildlife on Easy Street, and he wanted to film a segment for his Jack Hanna's Wild Adventures, I think. And we were doing the rescue of a couple of cougars, so he asked if he could go along and be kind of like the narrator talking about what we're doing while we did it. And so he comes with this whole entourage of people, and I knew Jack Hanna as the expert, the big cat guy, you know, the one that was on TV all the time. And you would think that anybody who would know anything about exotic animals would be Jack Hanna. And when he showed up, I was dumbfounded that he didn't seem very bright, and he didn't seem to even know about the animals. And so like every line had to be fed to him by the production crew that he had in tow. And he was relaying stories to me as we're standing in front of some of our big cats, and he's kind of close to the cage because we're filming this. And he's saying, "Oh yeah, you know, I used to have lions at my house and I had them as pets." And I'm thinking, what the heck? And then he starts telling me about how some kid was like nearly killed or killed at his facility because he had let the kid pet the lion. And I was just like, what? I couldn't believe this was Jack Hanna. And all of his people are like trying to like, no, let's not talk about that. And it just made me realize that this image of him on TV was nothing like who he really was in person. So it made me wonder even more. I mean, I knew that the whole thing about all these cubs that they take on TV were not coming from these zoos because you couldn't find them at the zoos afterwards or before. But I didn't know as much about what was happening, of course, until after the conservation game looked into the depth of some of those things. But it ruined my impression of who these people are. So when other people started imitating Jack Hanna, like Boone Smith and Jared Miller and Grant Kimmerer and the Irwins and all of that, every time I would see them, I was like, I wonder if they're like Jack Hanna. They're like this attractive, charismatic kind of character that's being trotted out onto the stage, but underneath they don't know anything. And I don't know if that's true of all of them because I haven't met them in person, but it made me wonder if it wasn't kind of like a Hollywood shill game.
So if it's not their knowledge of the animals, how do people achieve this position of celebrity conservationist? Is it money or politics? What's your take on that?
I think television and Hollywood are, you know, it's an easy thing to blame them, but I think they feed the public what they think the public wants to see. They want to see somebody that's attractive, somebody that's charismatic, somebody that's friendly and jovial, and he is that. I mean, he's friendly and he's just happy-go-lucky, and that's why everybody loves him, because he's that kind of a personality. He's not an evil person. I don't think he's that bright. And so by having that kind of a person that they can trot out onto the TV, feed them whatever lines they want fed to the public, and then mesmerize people by dragging these baby animals out there. People, when they're in the presence of a baby lion or a baby tiger, they're not hearing a word that you're saying. You could be telling them something totally wrong that they even know is wrong, but all they're doing is going gaga over the baby. So I think it sold commercials. I think it sold advertising. I think it was profitable for whoever was behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And most of these baby animals that you're referring to came from these underground, really seedy markets. And most of the investigation takes place in markets like this. And Tim Harrison goes undercover. I'm curious, before Tiger King and before you became kind of a household name, did you ever do any undercover work or try to find out the truth for yourself?
Actually, before I even knew the truth for myself, I was in a lot of these places because back in the 90s, when we started the sanctuary in 1992, there was no internet. And
Right.
so the only people we could turn to were these people that are running these backyard zoos. I called our big local zoo, big accredited zoo, when we came home with all those bobcats. And I asked them, I've got 56 bobcats we just rescued from a fur farm. What should I be feeding them? And what kind of cages do they need? And how much space do they need? And they just hung up on me, because I was that stupid element of the public, the private owner, and I didn't know what I didn't know. But as soon as the internet did come along, I found out that none of these cats in private hands can ever be set free. None of them serve any conservation value. And so we stopped buying and breeding and selling all of that back in like 1997. But before we learned better, I was in all kinds of these places. I went to a lot of these auctions. I saw how these animals were being traded there, like you'll see in the conservation game. When you see that, that is exactly what it looks like, except it's worse in person. And the number of animals being shuffled through those auctions is just staggering. And Ohio was one of the cesspools for that kind of thing. Ohio, Texas, and Florida have always been three of the worst states.
I think that's really hard for people here to believe because it is so underground. We don't see it. And so when you tell people Ohio is a hotspot for this sort of thing, they don't want to believe it because we don't see it. And we're big cats doing in Ohio. And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of cats from Ohio from markets like this. Can you tell us about their condition or what living like that in those conditions have done to the cats?
Typically what happens is people that are exploiting these animals can only do it between about the ages of 8 weeks to 12 weeks. And that's when they're small enough that people can hold them and have their pictures made with them. And then after they're about 12 weeks old, they can take a finger off a child and they go from being a very lucrative asset to being a huge liability. Same thing goes for doing all these talk shows and going out to events. They can only manhandle these cats while they're small enough to manhandle. And then as soon as they start biting people and becoming who they are, that's when they take them to these auctions and get rid of them. Or they may keep some as breeders, breed them absolutely to death, like they will leave the two parents together. And so the minute that mom has babies, which is like 68 days of gestation, they'll pull the babies away and she's left in there with the male to be bred right back again. And they just do it until the cats are dying. And that's when they take them again to the auctions to get rid of them. And so it was in the conservation game that Tim Harrison first noticed, here's some of these conservation guys from TV that are here at these auctions buying these babies. And so that was what led them on that path to find out what are they doing at these horrible places, and then come to find out this is a very common occurrence. So I don't know why Ohio is such a hotbed, because Texas and Florida, we had like year-round weather for people to breed a cat to death so they can make a lot of money off of the babies. I don't know how Ohio ever got to be such a huge part of that industry, other than some of the culture there allows for it, maybe more so than in other places. You know, a very large Amish population, which seem to always be involved in these exotic animal dealings. It's very common in Pennsylvania as well that they're involved in those. And what you'll see in the conservation game is the places that these animals come from and the ones that they will go back to after they've been used in these shows are wretched, absolutely wretched, tiny, barren, decrepit enclosures where the cats have no kind of life. I personally don't believe any wild cat should be bred for life in a cage, because there's better ways to save them in the wild through putting live streaming cameras in habitats where they live and having the money from those feeds go back to the communities and support those communities. But zoos aren't doing that yet. So I think they will be soon, because I think COVID's only going to be an ongoing issue that's going to cause them to have to remake their model into something that they can do virtually rather than in person. I feel like we have to show them how to do it and how to monetize it before they're going to take action to do that and stop breeding cats for life in cages.
When you receive cats and they spend the remainder of their lives because they've already been in captivity in your sanctuary, what do you do to make sure that they have the best quality life possible in captivity?
Oh, well, there's one way you can tell for sure that it's working here, and that is that our cats live about twice as long as they live in even the very best zoos. And that's because it's peaceful here and it's quiet, and the cats get enrichment every day, and they get the best quality food, and they get great vet care and all of those things. But the things that we do to make their lives special are every morning when we start our day, we feed the cats. We make sure all the cats are separated. There aren't too many cats who live together, but even the ones who do will fight over food, and they should never have to fight a day in captivity. So we separate everybody to make sure that they can eat their own meal in peace. And then we put them back together and clean all the cages. And then the volunteers go out and do operant conditioning and enrichment. So every day they get some form of enrichment that is something new and different for them to tear up or pee on, or something different to eat, or, you know, something cool. And then the operant conditioning is something that we did it because we had taken in a whole bunch of circus cats, and the trainer came out to show us some of the reward method things that they do. We weren't about to do any of the cruel things they do, but the things that they do to teach the cats to lean up against the side of the cage to get a shot, or for us to be able to draw blood from their tails, or to check their teeth, or that's a sign to the cat is to open their mouth. And so the cats are just bored out of their freaking minds being in cages. And so they're always looking for something to do. And so we found that a lot of them, even though we were working with specific tigers from the circus, all the other cats were like, hey, I can do that over here, watch. So all of our cats ended up in the operant conditioning program. So they get that. This morning, I ran across one of our volunteers who goes around reading books to the cats, because some of the cats like that. Some of the cats like being sang to. So every Sunday we go out and have singing Sunday with the cats. And we're just always looking for something to alleviate the boredom and to give them as much space as we possibly can. Our cages are extremely overgrown so that the cats can go diving into the bushes and not be seen at all if they don't want to be seen. And it's just, I think that's the hardest part of what we do, is trying to keep the cats entertained, because they're so smart and they don't belong in cages.
And how many cats do you have right now?
53.
It's a lot. It's a lot of cats to entertain. Well, I think at this point, everybody's wondering, what can we do about this? I know that you're pushing some legislation through right now to stop things like this from happening. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, you'll learn a little bit about it in the conservation game. So I hope everybody sees that. And you already know, of course, but for the other viewers that will come and see that, they'll see that we have been working on a federal bill since the 90s, the late 90s. And we got a version of it passed in 2003, but there's always loopholes that you have to negotiate. And so we've been trying since 2003 to close the two biggest loopholes. And one is that people can still breed these cats in captivity and use them for cub petting. And the other is that they can still dump these cats into private ownership. And so the bill that we have currently is called the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And it does two things. It prohibits cub petting, which is what's driving more than 95% of the breeding and discarding. And it phases out private ownership. So people who have them can keep them, they just can't buy or breed more. And if people want to help with that, we make it really easy. All they have to do is go to bigcatact.com, type in their name and address. It creates an email for them. It creates a tweet for them that goes to their member of Congress. And it gives them a little script if they're going to be really brave and make the call to their member of Congress. And it tells them what to say on the phone call. So it'll call both of your senators and your House member. And that's the best thing that people can do, is to make that call. And if you do it at night or on the weekend, there's nobody there. You're just talking to an answering machine. So it's not so scary.
Okay, that's good to know. We'll link that in our website. So what is your hope? What is your hope that people take away from this film?
I hope that when people see this, they see that they've been lied to. And I hope it makes them challenge every time they see a cat in captivity, what that cat is doing in a cage, because it's not serving any conservation value. It's never going to go free. So why the heck do we keep breeding these animals for life in prison? But of course, you can follow us on all of the social channels. We're Big Cat Rescue everywhere. And we have literally hundreds of people that are on our Facebook page and Instagram page and our YouTube channels that are answering questions 24/7. So no matter what time zone you're in, there is somebody there who wants to answer your questions and tell you more about what's going on and empower you to make a difference.
Awesome. Well, we really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking with us. I hope that everybody goes out and sees the conservation game, and you are welcome in Chagrin at any time.
Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting this at your film festival. It means a lot.
Thank you.